Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to Night School. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold Night School. We bring down the most pressing conversations, the most urgent debates, the most important intellectual issues and political issues and cultural issues going on in the world today. And we do so because we are in getting a weird, there we go. And we do so because there's no place else doing it, family. When you go to mainstream media, when you go to corporate outlets, they just don't cover the information that needs to be covered. And tonight is no exception. In fact, tonight is a special situation. And the reason that it's special is because we're covering the vice presidential debate. Y'all remember the fun we had a couple of weeks ago where we watched and broke down the presidential debate? Well, we're going to do the same thing with the vice presidential debate. J.D. Vance, the man who wants to be the next vice president of the United States on the Republican ticket, along with Donald J. Trump, will be squaring off against Tim Walz, who is, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate on the Democratic side. Both men have had very interesting, and I would argue different impacts on their respective tickets and the respective electability of the top of the ticket. But we'll have to see here. There were a lot of sparks the last time, and there will be more this time. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Now, this is taking place in New York City. J.D. Vance is from Ohio. Tim Walz is from Minnesota. It seems to me neither has a home court advantage here, and this will likely be the only debate between the two. Now, the moderators are Norah O'Donnell from CBS News and Margaret Brennan. I also hear the OG, Ed Gordon, will be involved in the moderation as well. Shout out to Ed Gordon, my hero, my mentor, my big brother. But unlike the previous debate, there is no fact checking. The only fact checking that will happen is between the two candidates. Anyway, we're here. The two men are standing there. They seem primed and ready to go. We'll be jumping in on commercial breaks to give a little commentary. We have some wonderful panelists to join us tonight. And of course, we'll have the post-game, the post-debate analysis with three brilliant analysts coming up as well. So hang out and we're going to watch this all together. And just so you know, real fast, the candidates each get 2 minutes to answer. Their opponent gets 2 minutes to respond. And then there's 1 minute for rebuttal. So we'll also be watching to see how respectful they are, how closely they abide by the rules. We know Donald Trump often doesn't abide by the rules. We'll see how much lying is going to happen because with no fact checking, you can go off the rails. We saw Donald Trump go off the rails even with fact checking. We also saw Kamala Harris tell a few whoppers, especially around the Middle East, that went unchecked. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. And I think looking at my screen, looking at my Gucci, it's about that time. We're going to go to New York City for this incredibly important debate. Whitley Yates, who is a Trump supporter and a brilliant Republican strategist and analyst, will be joining us. David Johns.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program. President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments. The global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act has created jobs all across the country. 2000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 20, 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the attorney general of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree, it should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
wanna
One
have-
app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this, he kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm gonna give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was, I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, "Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism." You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should America trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that. There's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022, talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
All right, family, you are watching a special edition of Night School. We're covering the VP debates between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. And from where I sit, it is getting more and more intense. Start off a little nervous. It was a little bit of a snooze fest, but now things are picking up a little bit. We got a great panel after the debate is over. We have Feminista Jones, we have David Johns, and we have Whitley Yates. But right now, I want to pull in David and Whitley just for a few seconds to give their initial feedback on the pulse of things. I'm going to start with Whitley. What do you make of things so far?
Yeah, I think JD Vance is dog walking Walz. I was actually surprised that Walz wasn't better prepared. Some of the questions that should be knockout questions for him, he's stumbling and bumbling over. And I'm really disappointed in his overall, basically, representation of Kamala Harris. He could really be touching on their policies that they released a couple of weeks ago, but he's not. And I'm wondering if his poor performance is indicative of her poor leadership.
Wow, Dr. Johns, I suspect you're going to disagree. What do you make of the tone and temperature of this debate so far?
He's stumbling too.
Nope. Think you just think there's a little internet challenge. It might be on our side. David, can you hear me now? I think you're muted, brother. Hit that unmute button for me. Still can't hear you. Testing.
Okay.
Let me see. David, just try one more time. We can't hear David John. We need to hear David John. We need a rejoinder.
We need a rejoinder.
Let's see.
I want to hear how great Walz is doing.
I think at the very least, David is going to disagree with your assessment that Walz is getting dog walked, to use the technical term I think you used. Is there something we can do, David? I hope I didn't. Yeah, you're not muted, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe it's maybe he'll log out and log back in, and we'll figure it out. But Whitley, this is a very interesting moment right now. VP debates are always challenging. Sometimes they are spicy. I remember watching Sarah Palin, go out there, and people were like, I don't even care what Joe Biden has to say. I just want to see how Sarah Palin does. There are times where people absolutely wanted to see Kamala Harris, get, really mix it up with what was his name now? The guy Donald Trump tried to kill. He was the governor. He got Donald Trump's vice president last time.
Oh, Mike Pence from the great state of Indiana,
Yeah.
where I'm from.
The guy your
He
guy tried to
didn't
murder.
try and kill him, but someone did have a guillotine. It wasn't Trump. Let's not attribute that to Trump.
Fair enough. I'm half kidding. David, can you hear me now? Why can I not hear David Johns? This is driving me crazy. You're still muted.
He said it happened to him last time.
I know what he said. It's coming. We're going to work on your audio. It looks like the debate is back on. We're going to give David Johns the first response on the other side. Let's take it back to the debate.
The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
So yeah, it's working.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you saying
okay.
so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that will, long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. It's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think it's an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is—
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying healthcare once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of
Go
time.
ahead,
We have a
Laura.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret.
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis
Sure.
in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck. because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the childcare shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide childcare options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not here. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and pursue fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Sorry.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
We are back on Night School with our special coverage of the vice presidential debates. We got a great post show coming up. Things are still getting heated. A lot of interesting conversation. The last break I had Whitley Yates, a Trump surrogate, certainly a Trump supporter, responding. I don't know if surrogate is the proper word. Forgive me, Whitley. I didn't mean any disrespect. Are you a Trump surrogate, an official Trump surrogate?
I'm not an official Trump surrogate. No.
Okay, my apologies, but certainly a Trump supporter, someone who plans to vote Trump. I'm going to bring in now Dr. David Johns, who I can hear. I think say something.
Something.
There we go. What do you make of the debate so far in terms of the? And I feel like it's changed since the last conversation, the tone of it. But what do you make of what you've seen so far?
It has, but I want to tap back into our sister Whitley, because I know she thought she did her big one with that dog walk comment. Whitley, blink twice, sis, if you all right. Here's where I am. I think that line was about as clever as a campaign committed to lies about people stealing animals and eating them, in spite of death threats that have actual consequences for real people. And I could meet you where you are. I'm a connoisseur of like the most ratchet TV that is offered. And it is really sad to me that in this moment in our geopolitical reality, you as a Black woman are surrogating and searching for cheap punchlines for a party that considers your value based on procreation and your ability to do so. Let's join the two. J.D. Vance is an admitted, proven liar. Let's talk about that. And it was very rich that he attacked Madam Vice President Kamala Harris's leadership. So do this for me. Name a bill that James David Vance introduced and that's been codified. I'll wait.
Well, I'm gonna get her to reply to that when we do our post-debate analysis. Y'all gonna have time to get into the muck. Y'all gonna have time to debate and get into the weeds. I want to get your quick take though, and I have a sense of it now. How do you think Vance is doing so far? How do you think Walz is doing?
Vance is doing what he is supposed to do. He is showing up and demonstrating that he has an understanding of what's required to lead. He's offering receipts for what things look like in his state and in his time serving in the federal government. And he is being consistent and offering fact, very mindful, very professional, very unlike J.D. Vance, who continues to lie.
Oh, you mean Walz was doing what he's supposed to be doing?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Now
He misspoke.
You said Vance was doing what he's supposed to be doing. I knew you didn't mean that.
Y'all know what I meant. Y'all speak that. Y'all got exactly what I meant.
I gotta correct the record because I don't want you to get clipped out of context and that tomorrow you see yourself.
And both of y'all speak that.
Right. So that's why I'm like, I want y'all. I know exactly what you say. I just want to make sure the people know. In fairness, Whitley, since David didn't get a chance to jump in last time, I'm not going to let you jump in this time. But because I
don't want to do that, especially acknowledging the privilege that I have in my body. I would love for her to respond.
The only privilege we don't have, though, is time. I look like they about to jump back in right now. I'm not running those CBS commercials because they don't pay me, but it looked like they about to be, yep, the desk is back up. So but when we come back, you two talking along with Feminista Jones. We'll let it go back to CBS.
Statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are really optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
The first and only vice presidential debate. This election is now complete.
Yes, Lord, what a debate we just saw. Tim Walz, J.D. Vance, a spirited debate. Start off a little slow for me. A little bit of a snooze fest. I think Tim Walz looked a little nervous coming out. He was shaking just a little too much for me. J.D. Vance came out the gate smoking, not telling the truth necessarily, but certainly talking clearly and smooth. It was some good talking, just wasn't accurate talking. And between the two of them, I saw a lot of interesting debate, a lot of agreement, unfortunate agreement, I would even say. Just my position here, and I'll bring in my guests in a moment to talk this through, but I thought it was fascinating just how much agreement there was between two people who, on the campaign trail, claim to have such wildly different positions. Each person tells us that the other person is a threat to democracy. Each person tells the other person, tells the world that the sky is falling and the world's going to catch fire if the other person becomes president. And yet tonight, it's like, hey, we're not that far apart here, buddy. I see. Thank you. They damn near hugged it out. So for me, that raises a lot of questions. Tonight here on the post show, we're going to do what corporate media does not do. We're going to do what mainstream outlets refuse to do, and that is tell the truth. We are going to break down what people said. We're going to talk about what the respective positions are, where they went wrong, not just at the level of performance. I don't want to just say who gave the best debate performance. I don't want to just say who won the debate, although I think that's important to talk about. I want to talk about what the impact of this debate will be for the American people. What will the impact be for the election? But then I also want to talk about these actual issues. I want to talk about what it means for them to talk about Israel and Lebanon and Gaza for 17 seconds. I want to talk about how they talked about school shootings. I want to talk about what they mean when they say choice for women. I want to talk about what they mean when they talk about border and immigration policy. We want to get into this stuff because it is interesting. But now, y'all don't want me to do the yapping. I do the yapping all the time. I'm bringing in three incredibly gifted guests who are going to talk, who are going to break it down. And these aren't doctrinaire, easy paint by numbers political pundits. These are brilliant, beautiful Black people. And I'm just going to say, tonight we talk. First of all, let me welcome y'all first. Let me first welcome.
Unmute, please.
I'm going to first welcome a newbie to night school, Whitley Yates.
Whitley, unmute, please.
Whitley is a Republican strategist. She is a person who plans to vote for Donald Trump, although she's not a Trump surrogate. Would you consider yourself a Trump supporter?
Did I ever say who I was voting for? I'm absolutely going to vote for Donald Trump.
Well,
no, I'm not.
Not everything I know about you, I know you ain't voting for nobody but Donald Trump.
No, I'm not a surrogate of the campaign, and I'm not speaking in any.
But are you a supporter? Would you consider a Trump supporter? I just use the accurate terms.
I am a supporter of Donald Trump running and winning the presidency.
Okay. Would you consider yourself a MAGA person?
A what?
MAGA.
Sure, I guess. If that is people that are supporting and voting for Trump, then yes.
Okay. No, I only ask because I don't want to assign labels to people.
Yeah.
Who don't.
No one's ever called me that before, but I'll take it.
And look, that's like I said, corporate media do it different. We do it different over here. I'm
a conservative Republican, so
that works for me. I mean, as a title, not as an identity. David Johns, Dr. David Johns. I want to welcome you back to night school. Y'all all know David Johns. He's been on, I think you may be, you absolutely are our most frequent guest. So yeah, absolutely. It's you, Jameer Pond is second. And then, it's just y'all are only two who are neck and neck. I mean, you're the only one who gets to repeat invites. The audience loves you. I love you. We're going to have a great conversation. We appreciate your insight. So thank you for joining us tonight once again. David Johns, also, I just want to be clear, you are not a surrogate for Kamala Harris, although you are a supporter and plan to vote for her. Is that accurate?
I'm a supporter of democracy and a defender of freedom.
Fair enough. I'm only asking because later on, I don't want people to say, if you say something that you are official, this is the official word of the campaign. Same question that I asked Whitley. And we have our doctoral Neo, fresh off the burning sand, in her former life. She is a doctor.
Yes.
She's still from Lisa Jones, but she is also Michelle Taylor. Thank you for congratulations publicly.
Congratulations, sister. You earned that.
Thank you.
You earned that.
Thank you.
But
Thank
also congratulations on being such a powerful voice out here on this issue. And I know for a fact from your Instagram that everybody should follow, as they should follow David's and Whitley's, that you are not a surrogate of Kamala Harris or of what's the right here, Donald Trump.
Absolutely not.
and I think that's important, especially in night school, because so many of my audience members are supporters of neither and are trying to just make sense of all this. So I thought it was important to have a voice that very unabashedly is trying to make sense of all this. So I want to thank all of you for being here. Whitley, since you are the newbie in the group, I'm going to start with you. In our first break, you said something interesting. You said that you thought that J.D. Vance was, again, to use the technical political science term, dog walking Tim Walz. Tell me why. One, do you think, now that you've seen the entire debate, do you think that J.D. Vance won the debate? And if so, why did he win the debate?
I would absolutely say that he won the debate. And I think that when they started off the debate, it seemed like Walz was uncomfortable, maybe in his own skin, maybe being there. And it's really surprising from someone, who has led and governed states and been in Congress, that he would seem so uncomfortable. And there were answers that I believe that he should have been able to give with fluency that he seemed to fumble. And so very early on within the debate, what you're seeing is someone who seems outmatched quite clearly. And I think that a lot of people were expecting for J.D. Vance to say wild, outlandish things, and it was going to be a little bit more entertainment as opposed to facts. And that's not what I saw. And some of the people within the comments specifically watching this right now were also saying the exact same thing.
Okay. David, I'm going to bring you in. When you look at, before we even get to the substance of the issues, when you watch a debate, because, and I say that because Joe Biden, who I also know you supported similarly against Donald Trump before Kamala Harris stepped in. And when I mean similarly, I just mean you weren't voting Trump. You made a pragmatic decision to say our best chance of preserving democracy from your perspective was to vote Joe Biden. I think even people who took the position that Biden is a much better choice than Donald Trump still believe that Joe Biden didn't do well in his first, he didn't communicate that well in his debate performance. The performance didn't matter. So I'm saying for a moment, setting aside what we think about these candidates, when you watch the debate, did you feel that Tim Walz won the debate? Do you feel like he communicated himself effectively? Do you think he met his goals, or what Kamala Harris's goals were likely for him going into this?
Yes, I believe he won the debate. Yes, I believe he did what he needed to do. And I will even concede to our sister's point that maybe he was uncomfortable in the beginning. I think most people would be uncomfortable in the beginning on that stage for the first time ever in their lifetime. And I want to, again, complete the sentence, which is to say that if your expectation of someone winning a debate is to stand there and simply run their mouth without speaking on facts, then sure, J.D. Vance didn't have a whole lot to work through. But Governor Walz absolutely did what he needed to do.
Okay. Dr. Taylor.
Okay, I can't cuss, right? Because I can cuss on my channel. I can't cuss.
I'm scared to say yes because I don't want y'all to go there. You can curse. It's not adding
Wait a
up.
minute. No, because I got muted for cussing, apparently.
Okay, no, we're not going to cuss. We're not going to cuss. Listen,
the same thing I said. No, just
we're not
the
gonna
same
cuss.
thing that I want to set the ground rules first again. The same thing
Okay.
I said to Tiffany the last time. I said you can cuss, just not at each other.
I'm from New York, so you know what I'm saying. So like, it's whatever. So I'm in between somewhere because I recognize the theater of it, and to me, tonight was rather theatrical. And so, if we're determining the winner of a debate by theatrics, then absolutely, I think that Tim Walz won because I share his birthday. I could recognize the points where he tempered his incredulity. Like he would look at Vance and be like, in his mind, he's thinking N-word, what the F? But then he was just like, I'm not gonna say that,
let it
right?
go.
You know what I mean? So there were times when I felt like, in terms of dominating and connecting with the people, Walz was very much like, all right, he's saying some stuff, but let me talk to you. And I think when you're running for office, that's what's important. Talk to the people, get them to hear what you're saying. Vance was pathologically lying. And I think we were talking in my channel about how triggering that can be for folks that have been gaslit. JD Vance lied 95% of the time. Like literally things that he was saying were false, like absolutely false. However, he relies on the American people not knowing the truth. And he's so charismatic. And I'm a public speaker, so I critique it from that. As a debater, as a deliverer, that man was strong. And if people don't bother to fact check, he looked really good. But for me, I'm like, this man is a pathological liar. Like there's some psychosis happening there. So for me, it's all entertaining because they're both like representing, tickets that are full of shit and it's a complete circus. But if we're talking about the American people and what they're susceptible to, I think that Tim Walz wins this one.
Here's my concern. And I'm going to bring this to you, David, before I bring Whitley back in, because I can see on her face she got a lot to say. And I'm going to balance her time because there's fewer of her than there is of us.
I'm in the middle. What are you talking about?
She's the only one.
And I want to know.
David have had drinks together. I let us man, and we will. And after this is all done, Dave and I will get together and we will reconnect. And what it's love.
Fair enough.
Yeah, let's pray that I'm not signed up to go into an internment camp because of my gay black self. But,
right.
I just assumed that Whitley was the only person here that's going to actually vote for Donald Trump. That's all I mean.
Okay. Words matter.
Yeah.
That's all I mean when I say the only. That's what I mean. It's more of us than her. I meant more non-Trump voters than Trump. You know what I mean? I think all of us would cut our own face before we vote for Donald Trump. Whereas she's willingly doing so, and that's not a criticism.
She's going to willingly vote for a rapist, and that's fine, right? If that's
we can go all those places. We can go all those places. I just want to stay here for 1 second. These debates aren't for the people who already want to vote for the person they want to vote for. It's for that narrow slice of people who still haven't made their mind up. My fear, David, is that the people who haven't made their mind up aren't reasonable. To me, if right now, on October the 1st, right, you don't know whether Donald Trump is your person or not, then you're probably susceptible to lies. You're probably susceptible to the stuff. A year ago, different. But right now, if you still think Donald Trump is viable, then JD Vance saying a bunch of wild stuff that's not true would be an issue, or vice versa, right? If you happen to be to like lean in toward Kamala but don't know, Tim Walz, he if he tells a whopper, you might be okay with it. So I guess my question is, if what Dr. T is saying is accurate, and that is that Vance looked good to people who don't know much, and this election is going to be decided by people who don't know much. Is this a victory for the Republicans just by attrition?
I want to push back on the idea that people don't know much. And I know my sister, Michelle, so I know the spirit in which she offered it up. And my concern is that when that sentiment is usually offered up in the ether, it suggests that Black people don't know better and that we do what MAGA white supremacists and white racial actors do, which is act in our own self-interest. And as Michelle is acknowledging, that is the exact opposite of true. We continue to be the defenders of democracy. We continue to do the custodial work of caring for children and a country that often doesn't care about us when we need it to.
Family, I'm not talking about Black people.
Yes.
You
I'm
know
actually thinking about them. I'm actually thinking about the white guy in Ohio.
I'm talking about
Like,
them
that
crackers.
Trump still making
I'm
sense
talking
to
about
me.
the crackers. I'm not talking about black people, family. You know that. You know
I
that.
think it's the
Well, we
white
having
guy.
a conversation with black people in this space, so that's my frame. I actually wasn't
I got you.
considering them
Okay.
in this
I got you.
context, so that's what I heard, and that's what I filtered it through. So you might want to ask me a different question.
I'm not talking about us.
Do you think that the undecided do you think that the undecided voter in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Arizona, many of whom identify with Trump and I did,
They'll fall for the grift? Do I think that they'll fall for the grift?
Sure.
Quite possibly, but I never trusted white people. And this is why I have this energy in this space of having black conversations with black voters. And so, yes, semicolon, I've never trusted them. 67%.
Fair enough. I'm going to get to some specifics. One of the areas that I think they both were questionable was off the top. They came out, of course, in light of everything that's happened in the Middle East in the last day, not to mention the last week, not to mention the last year, damn near minus 6 days. I didn't hear a discernible difference between them on foreign policy. That scared the hell out of me. I don't expect to hear much from Republicans on this. And frankly, I don't expect to hear much from Democrats on this. Why should we believe Donald Trump is a better president in terms of creating peace in the Middle East or creating justice for Palestinians or holding Israel accountable or, preventing a full-scale genocide in Lebanon? I mean, any of these issues that we're dealing with, why should we believe that Donald Trump is better? Why do you believe that?
Yeah, I want to go back to Dr. Michelle using the word psychosis as a slight. I don't think that we should be utilizing mental health diagnoses to talk bad about anybody, no matter their color. So I do want to throw that out there. In terms of this question, when we're talking about what's happening in Gaza with Palestinians and what's happening with Israelis, it was really interesting because I wanted to see how Walz was going to walk the line. Donald Trump has been very clear about who he supports. It has always been Israel, an ally of the United States, and allowing Israel to decide and determine how they respond after October 7th is something that they've always stated. When it
You think that's a reasonable position?
I do think that that is a reasonable position. Yes, I do think that that is a reasonable position.
If Israel decides to circumvent international law, violate the Geneva Conventions, you feel like we should still allow them to do whatever they need to do?
I think both sides are doing exactly that. I think that they're both violating international law.
No, but that wasn't. That wasn't my question. That wasn't my question.
But I'm giving you my answer.
No, but you're answering the question.
That is what is happening, and I think the reason why
let me ask the question first.
Palestinians die is because Hamas and Hezbollah implant themselves within the citizens, specifically of Palestine, to shield themselves from being able to be attacked. And so the reason why you're seeing all of these casualties is because of the way in which they move and operate. And I think if we had a stronger president currently in the White House that is not Joe Biden and who was able to help, and let's be honest, he's not the best on foreign affairs, and we've known this for quite some time. And I think that if he were better with foreign affairs, then we wouldn't be in this situation the way that it is now. But when it comes to Kamala Harris and her position, specifically when it comes to whether she wants to free Palestine or support allies and be an ally of Israel, she has to walk a very tight line because her party has progressives that are screaming free Palestine, that are screaming that they want this ceasefire. And so she has to be able to say, yes, I support Israel as an ally of the United States, while also not pissing off the progressives within the party. And so it's a very fine line. I think Walz was able to walk the line, and that's why his answer to that question sounded so similar to that of J.D. Vance's.
Just a couple quick points.
Mark, real quick. I'm sorry. Can I?
No. I need to follow up on this. I just, I want to be responsible. And then, so first, the argument that the civilian death toll in Gaza is because of Hamas using human shields there's no evidence of that. It's an argument that's been used for decades. No international body has confirmed that. No war experts have confirmed that. There's absolutely no evidence to support the claim, but there is significant evidence to show that Israel's used indiscriminate power, disproportionate power, to target non-military targets. And this has been supported by international bodies, human rights organizations, etc. But I still want to return to the question that I'd like you to answer now. You said that the United States supports Israel's right to handle this in the way that it needs to. My question is, if it is determined that Israel is circumventing international law, should we still permit Israel to operate the way that it sees fit? That's what I'm asking.
I think that if Israel has been determined that they are breaking international law, then it is incumbent upon the United States as an ally of Israel to have talks with Netanyahu and discuss ways in which they're going to move forward that is within international law. Because I don't believe that we should necessarily be supporting Israel if they're doing that. However, when looking at this circumspectly and when looking at the United States and the way in which we engage not only in war within our own nation, but war abroad, it's not something that we're doing. And I think that it's incumbent upon us not only to be telling Israel what they need to be doing, but making sure that we're practicing it right here at home.
Fair enough. And just one more point as we move on. The United States under Trump also violated international law. Trump supported the annexation of the Golan Heights. Trump supported violating UNRWA. Trump supported, and even now as a candidate, Trump says, finish the job. We should go even harder. Remember, he said that in the first debate against Joe Biden. So effectively, Trump is arguing for an even more intense and devastating genocide in Gaza than the one that's happening now. So I'm not sure. I think there is no discernible difference, but I don't think it's because one is trying to walk a line. It seems to me that neither are walking a line. But I don't want to stay there.
You just mentioned the line that he was walking.
Who did?
You just mentioned the line that Trump was walking.
No, I don't think Trump's walking a line. I think Trump is doing the opposite. I think Trump is taking an extremist position, just like I think the Democrats are.
I think when I say walking the line, that means sticking to a position that has been stated. We're saying the same thing, but differently. When I say walking the line, what I'm saying is Trump has made his position clear and he stuck to it. What I'm saying on the other side, there's been some flip-flopping back and forth on ceasefires, on whether or not we should be supporting Israel and Palestine. And so when Walz was speaking, his answer sounded very similar to JD's because he's attempting to walk a line that Kamala Harris hasn't been able to walk.
Girl, you
right. Not to be pedantic here, not to be pedantic here, but initially when you said walking the line, you suggested that he was trying to appease the extremists in the party while trying to also be.
No, what I'm saying, okay, that's
fine.
Everybody's walking the line. That's fine.
Okay, everybody's walking the line, which supports my initial claim that there's no discernible difference. Right. So feminista, when you as someone who's identifies on the left and who isn't particularly happy with either candidate, when you see something like this, where you're outraged about an issue, whether it's genocide, whatever the issue might be, and you see two candidates take the same position, neither of which make you happy, what does that do for you? But also more broadly, what does that do for the voters? Because there's a lot of voters in places like Michigan who are like, I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. I can't support a genocide. What do you do when you're in that position where neither side makes you happy?
So I just want to say to my sister, I'm a retired mental health professional and therapist, and I spent almost 18 years working with people with psychiatric diagnoses. I was not diagnosing someone. I was just commenting on what I was observing as a professional. So I just wanted to say that. As somebody who is so left that I'm out the door, I watch these things and I just reminded that, this government is not set up to benefit the people it exploits, right? So anytime we think that the United States government is going to do the will of the people it exploits, then we're kind of ridiculous in thinking that. And since I am a part of the group that the government exploits, I have to speak up, right? And I'm watching this debate and I'm seeing, the Democrats take this, similar foreign policy stances as the Republicans have, because the Democrats are moving to the right, right? And what I've said in my own platforms is that I think after this election, we're going to see the emergence of a new party and we're going to see the shift in the Democrats, right? And so what I'm really interested is, because Black women are the most consistent voting bloc, I'm interested to see where Black women are going to go with this, because where Black women go, Sister Anna Julia Cooper told us, where I enter, so goes the Negro race. So I'm interested to see if Black women are going to go with the Democrats to the right, or if we are going to take leadership in establishing something. Now, my good sister here, you know, you're saying that you're going to vote for, you know, you're unequivocally going to vote for a rapist, and with similar passion that Kamala Harris has said she's unequivocally supported Israel since she was a child and was raising funds for them. So we can believe that when Black women say they're going to do something and that they're a part of that, then that's cool. I do not support this genocidal imperialist, you know, government that we have. And I think that whether blue or red, they all are functioning the same way. As I recently posted, do we really think people whose stock portfolios rely on American imperialism to stop it? When they say we're working around the clock on a ceasefire, why would we believe that when their pockets are lined by that? And that's on all sides. When you get an endorsement by Halliburton by way of Dick Cheney, I don't believe what you're saying in terms of you're working on XYZ. When you send them money and bombs that you sign, you know, we sign our names on and send smiley faces, and then we send them money to rig 2,800 beepers to explode in people's faces. No, I don't actually believe you. When people ask who I'm voting for, I'm glad I live in a state where I can write in Prince Rogers Nelson, because that's who I'm voting for. That's who I voted for in the primaries. I voted for Prince.
Not even a living sledge. I mean,
I did, but I voted down ballot for local people because I do think that that is important as well. You know, I am a fan of Dr. Butch Ware, Jill Stein. She's a white woman. I don't really trust them, but I can't be a part of this circus. And so what I'm doing is I'm existing outside as a Black feminist woman, because as a Black feminist woman in 2024, we cannot support any of this. This is nonsense. I don't go to Martha's Vineyard. I'm not one of y'all. And I know that y'all love it, but I don't be at the Inkwell. I'm from the hood. And so I'm representing the people in the hood. We do not want money that can be going to our childcare, healthcare, housing, and all of those things going to a state that does not need to exist. It does not have a right to exist. Israel does not have a right to exist. And they are fabricating this war with Iran to be able to exterminate the Palestinian people. Okay? No, I don't support that. I don't support someone who says she's unequivocally supported Israel since she was a child. I cannot do that. I will not vote for a cop. I'm sorry. I don't care about all of that shit. What I care about is that tonight, Tim Walz, Aries' brother that he is, showed what the potential is to keep the Dems from going too far to the right. They are being ushered in, and they're weaponizing identity politics to move people to the right. And that's terrifying for me. Kind of watching Tim Walz kind of remind us that there's a possibility that we could still be progressive. Support of this genocide. Billions of dollars have gone to exterminate the Palestinian people when people in the United States can't afford food. That's what I care about. I don't give a damn if you're Donald Trump or Joe Biden, Weekend at Bernie's. I don't care. Our people are starving, and they will not talk about that. I am queer. They will not talk about queer identity. When did that come up in the debate today? They removed death penalty from their platform. Okay, we just had, how many people died this week by executions? These are the things I'm thinking about. And since none of these circus acts want to actually address that, I'm going to vote for Prince.
And by the way, it says here Mark is aghast. They said I was aghast for you voting for Prince. I'm only aghast because I would have voted for Frankie Beverly. You know what I mean? But now that he's passed away, I think maybe we pick somebody, just a living legend. You know, put Babyface up in there. He's from Indiana. That might be.
He's also an Aries, so I'm with it. I'm with it.
So
at least he hasn't actually assaulted anybody like rest of these others.
Babyface is April 10th.
The day of it all.
Yes.
Eddie Murphy is right there.
Wow. So what were the issues for you, Whitley, that what were the issues for you, Whitley, that you see as the sort of the really meat and potato issues that register with voters today from either candidate? Like, what were they talked about maybe.
Why you keep it over asking why she's a MAGA Republican?
Because I want to focus on the debate part first, and we're gonna get to where people.
David wants to host the show.
I just want to understand. I just want to understand why we're in this space as Black people having this version of the conversation. It feels like Get Out. I'm not trying to be funny. I sincerely wanted to know if I missed something.
And as a woman, I want to know why you're voting for a rapist.
I guess the same reason why you're voting for someone that wanted to keep Black people in prison.
I'm
so
actually
they could
voting
use
for
them
someone who does no longer
prison
alive.
labor.
Why?
I'm voting
the
for someone who's
left.
no longer alive.
So
So
I
I'm
would
saying Karen
say,
Chris
I
never
just
wanted
looked
people to
it
be in
up.
prison.
There's a 2014 NATO report that talks about Hamas using human
Drop the link in
shields.
the chat.
I'll drop it in the chat. I'll drop the link. I'll drop the link
Oh, just a
in the
reminder,
chat.
I'm voting for
No,
Prince.
like actually drop it. Don't do what JD and
Well-
Donald John do. Drop it in the chat so we can actually discuss it based on facts.
Yeah, I'll
Not
drop it in the
concepts,
chat.
not concepts of a report. Please,
I'll
let's
drop
see
it in
the
the
report.
chat. There you go. In the chat. It's in the chat.
David, in the chat, they said they would vote for us. as
One
a
of the
ticket.
things that, not one, I'll talk about like three of things.
Just one quick question about that NATO report. Have you read that NATO report?
Yeah.
Yeah,
When did you read it?
we got to get the talking points down.
This
When
is
did you read
a
that
while
NATO
back. You guys were just saying that it didn't exist and all these things.
Yeah,
Who
because
Who is you guys? Let's be
I
precise.
don't-
Let's be
we don't have to
precise.
stay
Who is
there,
you
but
guys?
Okay. So you guys said it didn't exist.
Who is you
I'm
guys?
giving you something that
Who is
exists.
you
So
guys?
we can just follow back up. We can just follow back up with that.
Who is you
Back
guys?
to the question.
Please be clear about who you're talking to.
Back to the question at hand. The question at hand was what was in the debate that I think that people are kind of focused on right now: the economy, immigration, and reproductive rights. I would say those are the top three issues that a lot of Americans are focused on right now. And those are the top three issues that they spent the most time on within this debate.
Say more.
I'm sorry, I tuned her out. What did she say? I'm sorry, I was reading the chat.
The three issues that were most important to voters.
Yeah, I'm giving you the three issues. Right. So we started off, based upon my notes, we literally started off with the Israel, but most people are focused on reproductive rights, the economy, and immigration. And really it's how immigration impacts the economy and their quality of life. And so you hear one of the things that I heard that was very shocking and surprising to me that I wanted to fact check myself because I wasn't sure. I'd never heard of it before, which was that like 291,000 undocumented migrant children were lost by the Department of Homeland Security under the current administration. I did go and fact check that. I did find that that is accurate. That's very alarming to me. It's alarming that the first time I'm hearing about it is at this debate. It's alarming to me because one of the biggest issues that we had, not only in the Trump administration, but also in the Obama administration, was this idea of children being separated from their families and children in cages and these deprecatory conditions that the children were in the United States. And I would have thought if we didn't learn from Obama to take the kids out of cages, and we didn't learn from Trump that the cages that the kids were in that are nicer and they may not have fences, and that we should be reuniting these children with their families, that at least in the Biden administration that's bringing back civility and restoring the soul of the nation wouldn't have these practices in place. And now I'm learning that not only is it in place, but we're also losing them. And so, no, it did not start under Trump. It started under Obama that kids were in cages. That's the comment on the screen. And
Yeah,
so, and when I
more
say
people than
cages, I mean
Democrats.
fenced
We know
in at facilities, fenced in at facilities.
Nobody has deported more people than Democrats, but nobody has stolen more children than Republicans.
That sounds good. Can you go ahead and drop that in the facts in the chat?
Oh, I can absolutely do this.
Absolutely.
Like seriously, sis. Like,
So
where are all the children that were disappeared during the pandemic? They're in white homes being indoctrinated to be white because the Republicans are scared that no more white children
You got the right
are being
ones,
born.
sis. Go ahead.
Listen, drop it in the
But
chat.
I'm saying that I'm actually criticizing the Democrats. So you might want to relax on that because
but-
nobody has Democrats deported more Democrats, but nobody has stolen more children. Since you want to talk about the children, okay, we're talking about all the children from the southern border who are now being raised in White Houses, being named Kaylee and Jackson and all that shit, and they're being raised because white people are not having enough children. Okay, so let's talk about the disappearing children that are ending up in homes in the Upper East Side as domestic laborers because they're being trafficked by folks. If you want to start talking about that, we'll do that.
I think we should talk about it. And
no,
I think
you're not ready for that, sis. And that's okay. It's okay because I'm actually existing outside of this paradigm. And you
So
seem
you
to
get
think
to
that it
decide
works.
what I'm ready for. You get to decide the conversations that
I'm
we
not
get to have.
deciding anything since
That's
you've
what
already
you just
decided
said.
when
Okay,
you
so
said
since
you
you
were
don't
going
want
to.
to talk about the conversation,
When you
let's
said
move
you
on.
were
Mark,
voting
next
for a
question.
rapist,
Next
you
question.
already told us who you
So-
were
so
when you
just-
said
just-
you were voting for a rapist.
It's
As
okay
a woman,
if
you
you
are
do
supporting a
not
man who has
like
raped people and has been is adjudicated rapist.
people.
There is
So
nothing
this
that
is
you
an
can
interesting-
say after that
That's not
that
even-
anyone
that's
should
not even-
ever
So let's talk
respect.
about this in the context
You're
of
so
JD Vance.
upset,
Let's talk about
Doctor,
this in
and
the
I'm so
context of
sorry
JD
for
Vance.
that. I'm so sorry.
Let's talk about this in the context of JD Vance. But just again,
We're not even
one
talking about the
side note.
debate at this point. She's upset. I understand
I'm
why
not
she's
upset.
upset.
I'm
because
annoyed.
She
Let's talk-
exists
let's talk-
outside the paradigm in which I
let's address
live.
the issue. Let's address the issues here, and just for the audience's
She
benefit,
doesn't want to address the issue. She wants
and
to
just for the
know.
Oh,
audience's
I'll address
benefit,
the
the
issues.
2014
Immigration is an issue.
what I said earlier was that there was no evidence, no investigation, no research, no data that supports the idea that Hamas uses human shields. And to date, to my knowledge, there still is not one. The 2014 NATO report, which I've read probably 100 times and followed up, doesn't actually. It's not a study. It's not an investigation. It doesn't claim to be. If you read it as Whitley says she's read before, and I'll be honest, I don't believe that. But if because I think you're smart enough that if you read it, again, I think you're a very smart person. And if you read the report, you know that like their source. What were the sources? What was their evidence of that? What sources they used? I mean, since you read, I'm not asking you to remember. I'm just saying in general.
I mean, I don't remember all of the sources, but they were talking
Can you name
about
one?
different humanity. No, I can't. I
Okay,
can't
I'll
think
name
of
one. I'll
one
name-
source
No.
from this. What was it, like a 30-page report? Stop.
Okay, so
Mark,
I'll explain it for the audience.
That you had at the ready. That you had at the ready. That you were prepared to weaponize.
I
as
dropped it in
delayed.
the chat.
Everybody hold on.
You tried
Everybody hold on.
Back to
You
it. If we
tried
want to talk about rape.
Everybody
we
hold
talk
on.
about
It's fine.
rape.
It's fine.
You
I'll just
wanna-
tell the
if
audience.
you-
Everybody, I'm going to ask you all to stop for a second. Whitley doesn't remember, but 5 of the 8 examples they gave came from IDF soldiers. So they're saying that it's true because Israel said it's true. They didn't actually do a demographic analysis. They didn't do any topographical analysis. They didn't analyze the ground. They literally looked at and talked to IDF soldiers. They also watched news reports and decided from the news report what happened. That is not an investigation. Even if Whitley were right, even if the IDF were right, that wouldn't be evidence for it. What I said was that there's no evidence of this. As someone who studies this for a living and who is an actual expert on this, I am telling you that is not a study. Again, even if I'm wrong, this wouldn't be an example of it. I'm open to data. I don't have any investment in Hamas being right or wrong. You know what I mean? I don't care. You know what I mean? Whether Hamas looks good or bad. I just want to get at the truth. And what I'm saying is there is no evidence of that. It's just not true. There have been, and even if it were true, which it's not, I got to reiterate that it is not true. But even if it were, the examples they gave in 2014 were from the decade prior. So to argue that in 2023 a genocide occurred because of the use of human shields 20 years ago, when half the population of Gaza is under 18 and weren't even alive then, would also be problematic, unless you're arguing that there's a consistent pattern of using human shields that continues, except again, there's no evidence of that. There's literally no evidence of that. And even the example you gave of evidence of that is them saying, well, look, Israel said it. I don't doubt that Israel said it. My point is Israel's not telling the truth. And to show me a study commissioned by Israel that uses Israel as the source and not Israeli studies, Israeli spokespeople saying it, that is not a study. Just at the level of social science, that's not what a study is. Just definitionally, that's not what a study is. But I don't want to stay there. I want to get back to the debate. But again, I can't allow things to be said that aren't true. It gets in my. I don't know if that's because I don't do the zodiac thing. Maybe it's because I'm a Sag. Maybe it's because I'm a trained social scientist who's an expert in the Middle East. I don't know. But either way, JD Vance was pressed on this issue, and that's an interesting one. They said, you believed this before about Trump. You say it's a threat to democracy. You said this, even on the point Feministas is making. He's even said he believes some of the allegations against Trump, one of the witnesses we should trust. Or he sarcastically said, to be precise, well, Trump's never lied before. Now he's taking a different position. I'm not asking you whether you believe Trump or not. My question for you, Whitley, is a more tactical one, as somebody who's a very wise political strategist. And that is, does Vance come off as somebody who believes? There are people who say Vance is lying. He just wants to be president one day. because he knows Trump can only be a one-term president. There are other people who say, no, he was really converted, right? The more he watched Trump's presidency, the more he believed. Does he come off, in your estimation, strongly to those people who are skeptical of his motivations? There are people who see him as a bright young star. Other people see him as a smooth talker, right? Who's just trying to get in the door. How do you read Vance? I know you're Trump, but how do you read Vance?
You know, I think he was a very interesting pick for VP. And I think over the course of the campaign, what we're beginning to see is because he's so vocal and probably because he's a lot younger than Trump, he has a very unique communication style. And when I say unique, it is similar, I guess, to Trump's in that he says what he thinks and what he feels. And that has to be honed in. And I think that there has to be a level of accountability. And I do believe he is moving towards that level of accountability. So whether it was talking about why he has changed his position and being quite honest about it, while others may seem or say like he's a flip-flopper and things of that nature, I think it's really interesting because what you're seeing is people who didn't vote for Trump previously that are interested and that are going to vote for him in this election cycle can resonate. And I think that Trump choosing him as a VP pick is very indicative of saying, I can work with people who have either spoken bad about me, said ill things, and I'm going to be able to work with them to not only accomplish the vision of this administration, but to also get the agenda done. And I think that that was the goal in picking him. And I think that he comes off as someone who was a never Trumper, an anti-Trumper. I believe he called himself a never Trumper.
Yeah.
And then became a Trumper to show that evolution, that this is what I believe and this is who I'm going to vote for. And if I can do it, you can too. And I think that that resonates with people who feel like a little bit strange that they were so against him and now they're considering voting for him or are going to vote for him.
But Vance said, actually, he said why he converted to Trump, right? So he actually said from his own words that he was troubled by how negatively people were talking about Trump and he felt bad for him. This came out of J.D. Vance's mouth. And he said he didn't understand why people were attacking him so much, even though he didn't agree with him. He thought it was kind of messed up that people were attacking him so much, so he became sympathetic to him. So it's not about the evolution in that sense. What I think he saw was
opportunism. Word matter. Opportunism.
Yeah, and that's really it. And so if we've read The Handmaid's Tale and we've read all of these dystopian novels, which have naturally become history books, we can see J.D. Vance as the commander, right? As someone who converted to, who went from being a gay atheist to being a married Catholic. And he's now pushing this natalist agenda, right? He doesn't care about Donald Trump. He doesn't respect Donald Trump. He doesn't think that he's smart enough of anything. He actually sees himself as the next president because his own party may invoke the damn 25th Amendment to get Trump out of there and kind of slide him in. So we have to watch for that. And for me, the way I look at it, I'm like, that's good politics, right? That is the same thing that actually happened with Kamala Harris when they pushed Biden out and slid her in. Thanks, James Clyburn. You know, I think that that's good politics. That's how American politics works. So we're naive if we say that that isn't a possible plan, right? The problem that I have, this very sincere problem that I have with J.D. Vance, aside from the fact that he's obsessed with people having babies, is that he lies. Everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. At least there are Republicans that I'll listen to, like a Mitt Romney or John McCain or what have you, and I may not have agreed with them, but they were not lying every single sentence that was coming out of their mouths, right? And so I get that you support Trump and the agenda and things like that, but can you at least, as among your family here, right? Because we are, listen, we believe in redemption and recovery. We are family. You might not get the big piece of chicken at the cookout, but we'll give you a hot dog. Now, sis, can you just admit that this man lies? Pretty much everything that comes out of his mouth is not true. Can you at least say that? Okay, well, so then that's why this conversation becomes difficult because we are functioning
gaslighting
in the truth. We are operating in the truth here, whether we agree or not, right?
Well, let me ask you a question, Whitley, which is I think is an interesting one. There are moments where he certainly got pressed, and so did Walz. And I want to get to some of Walz's because Walz on that China thing was weird to me, and I thought his response was
So
terrible.
strange.
I thought it, but I also thought it was strange. We'll talk about it in a second, but I also thought it was strange that Walz presented a very clear question to JD Vance, which was, did Donald Trump lose in 2020? All he had to do was say yes and not look like a crazy person. And I don't think JD Vance believes that Donald Trump was cheated. I think JD Vance is quite reasonable and smart. Right. I'm sorry, because I'm reading your face and I want to make sure, I don't want to make assumptions, right? Do you think Donald Trump legitimately lost the election in 2020?
Yeah, I think that Donald Trump lost the election, which is why he's not president right now.
No, do you think he legitimately lost? That was my question.
I don't know about legitimately lost, but this is what I'll say. There were irregularities when it came to the election, and the irregularities came when they changed the rules for COVID, which allowed things in Pennsylvania that had never been allowed before, like ballots being able to be counted well after the date that they were submitted. Now,
COVID came in March of 2020. He was already president. Sis, what are you talking about?
It's
like,
gaslighting
like,
for me.
sis,
the
COVID
rewriting
had
of
nothing
history
to
for
do
me.
with the election. Again, that's why you won't
Well,
acknowledge
she's
that
right. She's right.
okay, so we didn't change laws for the election during COVID. That's a
How did it
complete
affect the
another lie.
election?
That's
though?
fine. We can
No, hold on. Again, I'm going to fact check everything because I believe in the truth. COVID came February, March of 2020. The election wasn't until that November. And so to encourage people to go to the polls, they absolutely created greater opportunities for what do you call it? Early balloting, mail-in balloting.
At the
Which
same
favors
time,
Democrats,
at the same
right?
time as Republican-led state legislatures were engaging in voter ID efforts and other voter suppression efforts. So what point are you making?
So if I was able
Not
to
allowing
finish before being called a liar, if I was able to finish before being called a liar, what I was going to say is honestly, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So the same issues that people are complaining about happening in Georgia right now are the same issues that Republicans were complaining about in 2020 in PA. So you have this exact same thing happening where not on the federal level, but on the legislative level, you're seeing laws change specifically around elections. Now, I'm from a state that was the first to ever have voter ID laws, and I do not think that that is an infringement. However, we also have the availability of free IDs to be able to vote as well. So I'm not sure if those states are
fair enough.
But I mean, Biden won PA by 1.7%. Biden won PA by 1.7 point. How did
free and accessible are not the same things? That's why we're fact checking in real time. We're fact checking in real time. Free and accessible are not the same things. To her point about infringement, let's not be circumspect. Let's be direct. Let's be precise. Let's acknowledge that words matter than things.
Well, I was already called a liar for something that was true. So words do matter. Accountability is important as well. Accountability is important.
Y'all know nothing about accountability, which is so funny.
You're talking to me. I thought we were
nothing about. Y'all know nothing about accountability. Y'all know nothing about accountability. Nothing about it.
I'm sorry. I just want to fact check really quickly. She mentioned PA. She mentioned PA. She mentioned PA. Can we fact check PA?
Everybody, I just want to hold on. Regardless of what happened in Pennsylvania, I understand Whitley's argument, which is that Pennsylvania may have been unfair to Donald Trump. My only point is Pennsylvania is 19 electoral votes. Democrats got 303 or 303 to 235, meaning that even if we were to just give Donald Trump Pennsylvania because he was treated so very, very unfairly, he still loses the election. So there's no argument that Pennsylvania delivered a presidential election. I'm not making any claims.
I just want to make sure. All I'm saying is that laws were changed, and those laws that were changed is what Republicans feel busted the election open. Just like right now, laws are. I just want to finish my point, sir. You're so upset, and I don't understand.
I'm not upset again. It's the gaslighting. I've never said I was upset, sweetie.
Right now,
this is righteous indignation at the gaslighting and the lying. You have not seen me upset. I wouldn't give you the benefit of upset, but love, I wouldn't give you that. You wouldn't get that from me. This is frustration with the gaslighting, with the fact that
she's not wrong. Wait. She's not wrong.
There is a little bit, in fairness, there's a little bit of sophistry happening here, only to the extent that I asked you if it was a legitimate I asked you if it was a legitimate victory for Trump or for Biden, and you said you questioned the word legitimate, and you pointed to Pennsylvania. But what I'm saying is, even if Pennsylvania were
not even just Pennsylvania, all I'm saying is the reason why Republicans feel like it was illegitimate, some of them, not all of them.
No, but but you're saying why you think it's illegitimate.
No, that I didn't.
I'm asking you. I'm not saying what you said.
I've already stated that Donald Trump is not the president. I've already stated that he lost the election.
Right,
like,
that wasn't the question.
I said that off tops, first off.
Right, but that
we
wasn't
don't
the
even
question.
need to go there. What I'm saying is the reason
you have already answered that question, but it wasn't the question I asked. My question was it legitimate? Yes or no? Was his victory legitimate, Joe Biden?
I think Joe Biden's victory was legitimate. The reason why Republicans are questioning it is because all of the things that I had previously named, which is the same reason why I believe in this election, if Trump wins, that other people will question it because they feel like the laws that are being put in place specifically in Republican-led states is going to be prohibitive for Black people in particular to be able to vote.
Okay.
So
now to my JD.
No.
I got to keep going because we'll never get to the point.
All right.
My JD Vance question for you was, JD Vance very reluctantly, well, not very reluctant, he avoided the question. He wouldn't give a straight. He kept saying, I want to move forward. I don't want to talk about the past. Why did he make that choice?
You're asking me, I wish we could talk about the debate. I don't know why. I can only tell you.
I'm not asking you in his head. I'm saying strategically as a strategist.
I can only tell you what I think. And the reason that I think that he made, you asking me why, but I'm going to give you my perspective. Once again, I'm not a surrogate for the campaign.
Okay. Let me pause. We're misreading each other. When I say, why does he do that? I mean it in the sense of a man crosses the street. He stops at the corner. Why does he do that? I'm not asking you to think for the person. I'm asking you to give me a strategic reason why a politician would.
I understand that's what you're doing, but as I've sat here on this platform, I've been called a liar when I wasn't a liar. So I have to be very particular in what I'm saying to make sure that people understand my perspective. So I don't know why he said that, but I can only.
Why would one say that? Why would one take that approach? That is my question. Why would one take that approach? Why would a human being take JD? I won't say JD Vance's name. Why would a politician refuse to answer that question strategically?
Well, I believe the reason why he didn't answer the question is because he's the vice president of Trump who believes that he did not win the election. And so he wants to remain in the good graces and good light of Trump. So he said exactly what Trump would think is appeasable. That's just
does that approach concern? Does that approach prove effective in your estimation to the voter who might be Republican but really thinks January 6th was crazy out of pocket, right? Like January 6th was wild. We don't want to defend that. We don't want a piece of that. To me, JD Vance's response was not so much to make Trump happy, which might be true. I don't disagree with that, but more to make that base happy, the people who actually go in to the Capitol and tear shit up, right? Those are the people who I think he's trying to play to. Because if you say it's a fraud, then they all start going, wait a minute, we did that for nothing. And you saw that with Nick Fuentes a few weeks ago. He literally was on air like, wait a minute, because Donald Trump said, yeah, I lost in a speech. He later said he was being sarcastic. Who knows with Donald Trump? I'm inclined never to believe what he says. But whether you believe him or not, there were people who didn't like that Donald Trump said, I lost. JD Vance obviously wants to keep those people in his pocket, as any politician would. But the question is, do you lose anything for that? Are there people who will be so disgusted by that approach or frustrated by that approach that they say, you know what, if you can't even admit you lost in 2020, I don't want no parts of this. You've learned nothing. I don't want parts of this again.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know if this is a big issue for undecided voters. I think the people that are going to vote for Trump are going to vote for him hands down. The people who are not, that absolutely hate him, are not going to vote for him. And I don't think that this issue in particular is a make or break issue, because I don't believe they're undecided because of January 6th. That's what I'll say.
David, a very easy question I thought was asked to Tim Walz, which was, you said you were in China on this date. Turned out you didn't get there for a few months later. How do you explain that discrepancy? Now, the frustration for me was, it was like, again, when I used to ask my teenage child, if the homework was done or what happened at school, it was like, I heard everything. I heard Donald Trump 17 times. I heard everything but the answer, and then at the end, he gave the answer. To be fair, he did eventually say, I misspoke.
Yeah.
But it seemed like he got caught in a lie. and he didn't want to say, you know what, I was telling a tall tale.
Yeah.
You know, the drinks was flowing. I started yapping, telling a bigger story than I should have. Like, it seemed to me like he gave Republicans free ammo.
And did. Period. Full stop. And let me go back to, while we're in the space of talking and community, Tiara, I appreciate the candor with which you answered the previous question. Again, so this is not lost. What you are experiencing is nowhere near anger. I wouldn't give you that. I wouldn't be on this platform with that. It is frustration with everything I experienced before that, which is gaslighting when we actually can't have conversations that are honest and based in facts. So thank you for your last intervention. Asked and answered, Mark. Unless I missed something, we can move on.
Well, Femini, so what do you make of it? David is answering it. He's saying, yeah, it wasn't a good look. What do you make of it?
What's the question?
Tim Walz lying about being and I hear I see some liberals online kind of defending Walz by saying,
what did he lie about?
Because what they're trying to make it seem as if
when he was in China.
They're trying to make it seem as
you
if,
know what? So
they're trying to hold on. Wait a minute. Let me say, they're trying to make it seem as if Republicans are just being petty about the dates.
Yeah.
But it's not just that he was there a couple. It would be like me saying, yeah, I was in the World Trade Center on 9/11. They find out I was there August 11th instead of 9/11. I was only off by a month. No, it's not just the month. It's what happened that day.
Yeah.
He was lying. And he has a habit of overstating what he does, whether it's
that's kind of what we do.
Yeah. And there's sometimes where I give Tim Walz a pass, right?
Wait, Mark, finish the sentence. What's at the other end of that sentence? What are the other examples to make that statement?
Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. That's what I'm saying. I gave him a pass on the IVF thing, right? Where he said, you know, I wouldn't have a family if not for IVF. He didn't have his wife never did IVF, but she did do IUI. She did some other things.
Right.
There's a big difference between IVF and IUI, but I understand that a lot of people don't. But there are a lot of people who don't know those distinctions. As someone who's done both, I've said IVF when I mean IUI because I feel like people just find out what IVF is, and so sometimes it's just using a common language. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I understand that sometimes people do that. He's been accused of stolen valor, you know, overstating his military experience and what he did in military service. So there are multiple examples where Tim Walz has just told too tall of a tale. He ain't the only politician to do that. Obviously, Donald Trump does it. You know, J.D. Vance tells some whoppers, not usually about himself. He tells them about other people. Whereas Walz will be like, you know, I was in Vietnam. You know, Walz will be like, I was in Springfield and they was eating people. You know, like they all have their own version of it. Vance does. That's what I'm saying. Like, my bad. So if I say Walz, I meant Vance. So like there's a way that they all tell these kinds of lies, but there's a particular thing that Walz keeps getting jammed up on. And I don't care about the particular lie of Walz in China. I'm like, yo, it's just, one, is it indicative of something deeper? But two, like, why handle it this way? It seemed like bumbling that answer made it a bigger deal than it needed to be.
Yeah. So I don't care. So to me, it's, what are you lying about, right? If he's, because I don't care if he's lying or if he misspoke or on, they're politicians. Every single one of them lies. They lie every single day whenever they're in front of a microphone. It doesn't matter what side you're on. Politicians are going to lie. So we accept that as a fundamental truth. Then we have to think about, okay, so what are you lying about? Are you lying and denying that the U.S. sent billions of dollars to Israel to exterminate the Palestinians? Or are you lying about, you know, you don't know the difference between IVF and other things like that? I actually don't believe that the man does. The man ain't got no money. He's around the way guy. He's a coach. I don't expect him to know all the particulars of those things. Now, when he was talking about his National Guard stuff and things like that, it's like, all right, to me, what material effect does this have on the United States people, like the citizens here, the people living in this country? That's what I care about. And that's on both sides. Like, I expect them all to lie. What really troubled me tonight was that J.D. Vance lied every time he opened his mouth. Tim Walz gets a little flustered where, you know, he's a passionate areas. We kind of, sometimes we just go in, we're like, we can't, you know, whatever. Yeah. But he's not lying about things that are like having harm. J.D. Vance outside this debate went, no, but I don't know. Like, okay, listen, First of all, they're running for vice president. Vice president does nothing, which is why the whole Kamala Harris.
Unless the president gets incapacitated.
Yeah, but they're not.
That part.
They don't do anything anyway. So this is all political. So they're all talking nonsense. But anyway, what
that's not true.
Come on. Like they. Okay.
Again, Kamala's in this position because the Democratic Party believed that the party didn't want a chance. Joseph Robinette Biden died while in office, and then opening up to chance.
No, I get it.
It's the both. It doesn't matter until it matters.
If Tim Walz says that his wife had IVF when she had another procedure, what material effect does that have on the American people? Pathology. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I'm saying is that JD Vance tonight exhibited his pathology, which he just admitted when he was talking to Dana, and he said, if I have to make up stories to get the people to pay attention, he already let us know he is willing to lie
in spite of
get ahead.
Tim Walz is not doing
that. Tim Walz is not actually coming out and saying, I'm going to lie to win votes. I think that he's a knucklehead.
Or inspiring insurrection.
No politician is 100% honest. No politician is going to get it right every time. No person is. So I think what the voters have to do is decide, is this person intentionally lying to reconstruct a narrative to get me to vote, or is this person like lying because they want to make themselves look better or what, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the stuff. I'm not giving Walz a pass. Again, aside from him signing in Prince Rogers Nelson Way, I don't actually care much. You know, what I care about is that he has not signed a bomb that was being sent to Israel to exterminate.
Not yet.
That's all.
But he promised.
He could. Because that is the Democrats. This is the government way. They like doing that. They're like, kiss, we're going to.
Were you satisfied? What did you make of his response?
I think it could have been a really great moment, I think, for him to just kind of atone and say, oh, I thought I was, but because he did go, like, he did not go, but he did have his dates mixed around. He is a little bit older. I don't think he's being malicious when he is misspeaking. He said, I misspoke when they pressed him. I don't think he's being malicious when he misspeaks. I will say that. The problem is he tends to misspeak kind of a lot. He tends to elaborate and exaggerate things and make things seem like they are when they weren't. And he was at war while I wasn't at war. I carried guns in war. Like, he does this quite often. And the issue that I honestly have with it is that we can't do that. Like, we can't misspeak in that way. If I was running as a VP or anything, I have to have my facts down so precise that I cannot misstep. I can't make a wrinkle or a crease as a person of color. And I just think it's rather interesting that he's able to elaborate on the things that he's done in the past. He's able to misspeak about things that have happened to his wife. He's able to, misspeak about whether he went to Asia and things like that. And he misspoke again tonight, saying that he was friends with school shooters. I know that he did not mean that.
Yeah, right. That's just a stumble.
I know he didn't mean it, right? But it's the fact that it's okay. But if it were me,
so Trump lies every time he opens his mouth.
There's a level of privilege that I believe that he has in the complexion of protection that allows for him to maneuver in this way.
Right.
And we can't maneuver in that way. That's what burns my biscuit.
Do you think he lies more than Trump does?
Do I think that he lies more than Trump? This is what I'll say. I know that there have been some mistruths that Trump has said. This may sound crazy. This may sound crazy. I honestly believe that Trump believes what he says.
No, I agree with you. I think he does.
I agree with you.
No, I don't think so. Because
that wasn't the question, beloved. But that wasn't the question.
Like, I honestly, so
acknowledging that, who does it more? Who believes the lies that they tell more?
who believe, I don't know. I
No,
don't know.
hold on,
So
hold
here's
on.
the thing,
Let me
because
ask
he
you-
said
let me
that
ask you
Kamala
something.
Harris
What
is
is
March,
happening?
right?
I want out of this
What is
circus. So
happening
we've been
here?
having this
Everybody pause
conversation.
for a second. I'm gonna restate the question a little differently.
Let's restate it.
So, assuming that Trump believes these things that are not true, stipulating that still, who makes statements that are inaccurate more often, regardless of whether they believe them or not? Who do you believe is stating these untruths more? Between
I
the two
believe
people?
that when Trump is fact checked, he has more mistruths and or lies or misrepresentations, or it was really this and it should have been that more. However, whenever he is pressed on it or asked about it, and he presents the reason why he said and did the things that he does,
You
he
believe it.
convinced he believes it. And
You
so
believe it.
I'm
Okay,
not gonna lie,
that
like
actually,
No,
that actually
she's
scares
right.
me. But
She's right.
I want to go to something else now. I want to go to something else. JD Vance was asked about the national abortion ban. Donald Trump was asked about JD's position on a national abortion ban. In the last debate, in the presidential debate, Trump was asked if he supported Vance's position that there should be a federal or national abortion ban. And Trump kind of said, not really. He didn't give a straight answer, but he did not echo Vance's position. Tonight, Vance was asked about the national abortion ban, and he said that he didn't say that. He says that he did not advocate for a national abortion ban. He said specifically tonight, and I quote, "I never supported a national ban. I did, when I was running for Senate in 2022, talk about setting some minimal national standard." Now, if you do just a little bit of digging, like you go to him on the podcast Very Fine People in that year 2022, he said that he would certainly like for abortion to be illegal nationally. So fact check, he lied, or at least so either he doesn't remember saying it. I don't believe that though, because this is pretty high stakes, and he said it many times in different places. This is back at a time where he didn't believe that abortion should be, there should be exceptions for rape and incest. He said, quote, "Two wrongs don't make a right." It's not whether women should be forced to bring a child to term, it's whether a child should be allowed to live, even though the circumstances of that child's birth are somehow inconvenient or a problem to the society. The question really to me is about the baby. Now, he has also said he supports a minimum national standard, but he's also said that it should be national, that he supports, and that he would certainly like for abortion to be illegal nationally. So one, I want you to address the, what's the word you use, mistruth, whatever we want to call it, of that. But also, what about the position itself at a moment where the Harris administration is very strongly running on a record of women's liberation, reproductive justice, abortion rights, etc. Vance is taking a much stronger, more strident position than Trump is. So it looked like Vance in a little bit was trying to move back to the middle a little bit all night. It seemed like he was trying to sound a little less radical than he is, to make himself more appealing to mainstream America, and maybe to the people who he wants to vote for him for president. But he went from being cagey to actually lying tonight. How do you make sense of that? And what are they? Well, just talk to me through that.
And really quickly, when did he advocate for the ban? What year was this? Was this pre
2022?
Post Dobbs? This is post Dobbs. I just want to make sure it's post Dobbs. The Dobbs decision.
Oh, Dobbs. It was pre Dobbs.
So it was okay. Which
but
is
the
what
point is, but the bigger point is he's saying he didn't do it. He said he advocated for something in the very year that he's saying he wasn't advocating for it.
Okay. Well, if it is proven and they've said that he has it, they done clipped him and he says he had, but he didn't, then he needs to go ahead and say, I misspoke, and go ahead and be accountable for that. What I do find interesting is that when you have a candidate who is making their position known, which is, I'm never going to vote for a national abortion ban, which is Trump, and you become their vice president, you have to be in alignment with what they say, even if what you've said in the past.
That don't frustrate you for any. I'm not talking about Republican. I'm just in general. Can't you just say me and the president disagree on this? Why we got to lie? Why can't you say like me and the president disagree on this?
The same way that Kamala said that she was going to ban fracking, became the vice president, and then said, Joe Biden, we are not going to ban fracking, and then restated it in this election, because you have to, as the vice president, it is your duty to support the president. So when it comes to whether it is that, I mean,
I just don't buy that in either position. And either I think you have to take a principal position. Kamala
right,
Harris on
and I
fracking
understand that.
has been
And I
wrong.
understand why, but in the political spectrum and sphere, even if you feel like he's wrong, then you're going to be wrong and strong together, then sow that level of division, because that does not hoard, hold, or perpetuate power. And that's what this is all about, is who gets to control the resources and why. And so you're always going to be lock and step, wrong and strong, or right and tight, because you understand that having your person, your party in a position of power is greater than not. And so that is why you're going to see politicians on both sides of the aisle consistently kowtow. Like the AOC who started out versus the AOC now is not the same AOC. And you have to kowtow to those. If you want to stay in your position of power and you don't have the heart of the people, then you have to kowtow to the people in positions of power in order to be able to remain in their good graces. And that's part of our political system.
I think what's interesting is that Kamala Harris keeps saying to people, she looks directly into the camera and she says, my views have always been the same. And it's kind of like a little thing. I think she's kind of wink, wink, nudging people and saying that her views, like when she's asked about fracking and death penalty and things like that, she's like, my views have not changed. And it's more like the Democratic Party's views have changed. We've quietly removed some things from our platform. We've changed whatever stance. And so there's part of me that's like, is this her trying to send a signal that she personally still believes these things, but has to take that stance? And I think that confusion resonates with a lot of people. They're like, well, are you for fracking or not? Are you saying this as lip service? Do you really believe this? And I think that's where they get caught up. And we have to be honest about that the fact that she has changed her position on things that were like fundamentally, what she was about, and now all of a sudden she's changed that position. It's okay for people to question that and wonder, when if she's elected, which side will she be on? And I think that's what's happening on the conservative side. They're pointing this out and saying, well, the Democrats are saying X, but they really mean Y, because we saw how they were before. So they're concerned about that. And then you've got some folks on the Democratic side who are like, well, where do you stand on this? And so I think that question of like the flip-flopping is a legitimate one, because, whatever, that's you're going to ask that of any politician.
Maybe I'm just old, but I remember the days when Reagan and Bush would battle it out, or Gore and Clinton would battle it out. And sometimes they had different positions on what was then called gay marriage and what was then called legalization of marijuana, whatever the thing might be, death penalty. And they just said, look, I support I don't, me and the president see it differently, but
okay, I like that you brought up the gay marriage thing, because what, Obama did, he was like, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman.
He
right?
sure did.
And people, wanted to support that. And then he gets in office and then we get, same-sex marriage. So I think some people are looking at that, with him being the last biracial president, that maybe the next one might do the same kind of flip-flop, and the things that she brought up and said that she was against, that maybe when she gets in office, she'll also do that.
The biraciality.
I'm acknowledging his biracial identity. We're not erasing this.
Doctor, can you break down how the biraciality could impact decision-making skills? And
yes, because he was raised by a white woman, but whatever. But no, I'm mentioning that he's biracial because I think it's important to acknowledge the biracial identity. We have many people who don't want to check one box.
I appreciate the acknowledgement of the biraciality. I just wish it wasn't attached to the queer shit.
Well, no, but okay.
Because we skipped over the fact that, again,
he was wrong. So I just brought that up.
He was wrong. He was
not
wrong.
Connected to that, David. I'm sorry. I apologize.
He was wrong.
I thought it was bullshit at that time.
He was wrong. He also appointed Arnie Duncan, who was right on the issue and was Secretary of Education, who helped to compel him to shift. And so
I brought it up for the purposes of the conservatives who are looking at this as a race thing, right?
I appreciate that.
So
I appreciate that. And I worry about the ways in which the Hoteps. I worry about the ways in which the Hoteps bastardize anything that is associated with gay.
I get that, and I also know that most of them can't vote because of, So anyway, so I'm looking at.
I don't even know how that sentence was going to end.
Why do you bring me on these things? So I'm more.
I want the sentence. Question these answers.
I live in a cul-de-sac where there's a Confederate flag flying, and more of these Trump Vance things are coming up. I am looking at it from their perspective. they bring up the racial issues. They're bringing it up with her. So they're looking at it like the last biracial guy we had, the last black guy, fine, I'll leave it at that, said he was against same-sex marriage, and then when he got in office, he changed it. So here we have another one of these pickaninnies, and they're saying that they're going to do X, but look at how those black people change their minds when they get in office. I'm just looking at it from that perspective. I don't agree with it. I'm not, whatever. So I'm saying that there are people who are voting for Trump, even though they don't like him, because they don't trust what she is saying because of how she has switched on the issues. Okay,
that's an interesting take, and her on frack. And I'll be honest, fracking isn't anywhere near the top of my list, so I haven't.
But it isn't PA. You know, it isn't
No,
PA,
it matters.
and that's why, because Biden only won PA by 1.7 votes, and Hillary lost by about 1 point something. So in PA, we have to think about those issues because it really could make or break the election, which is why she has no choice but to flip on it because they need PA to win. And so when you think about that, it's all politics, and it's not about the people. It's all about the politics.
All of that is true. And I, in this moment, just want to name my frustration around how we got close to creating space for politicians to be people who can make a statement and experience life, and at some point evolve and declare a more mature and evolved appreciation for life. And we now have devolved back to what is often a one-dimensional critique of the Democratic representative in this moment, without full appreciation for the fact that the MAGA Republican has an intimate relationship with lying that is problematic, and it is frustrating, and it forces me to ask myself why I sign up for being in spaces like this, where it feels like I'm invited to a circus where I really just want off of this ride.
I think there's my answer is always that there's power in the dialogue as long as it's in good faith and civil. Like there are people, and the last time you were on, I never met the brother before. You know, I've had Whitley on a couple of times on other platforms that I no longer work at. And I think she argues in good faith. I think she's wrong. And I say you're wrong, right? And she'll say the same to me. But I think I think too often we don't talk to each other and we don't create space to hear. And frankly, I think it's important for the audience to hear the strongest argument that a pro-Kamala person has and the strongest argument that a pro-Trump person has. And for Black people, what's the best argument a pro-Trump Black person could give? And I think Whitley has honestly made the strongest argument that a pro-Trump Black person could give. I don't think it's a strong argument, but I think it's the strongest one possible. And I think that's helpful to the voters to make decisions. I think it's helpful for people to say, here's what I want. And similarly, I think the people who agree with Whitley would probably say, and I don't want to speak for them, but I suspect they probably would say, I just watched two people who are critical of Trump talk, and people offer a different perspective, and I'm still unpersuaded. I'm still wearing my red hat. I'm still voting for Trump. And so I think the dialogue is helpful so we know where people really stand. But also, David, you asked something earlier that I do before, and we're going to wrap up. But before we do, I wanted to get back at the question that you asked, because I think this is something that I've always wanted to know, and I always try to ask people, which is, how do you land here? Mm-hmm. Whether it's you, and I want you to answer this too, David. I already know your answer because I know you and you've answered it, but I still want you to answer it again. Sort of how you land here. But you asked it of Whitley, and I want to give her space to answer that. Like, how does a smart, talented, you were a law student, right? Mm-hmm. Were you in law school when you became Republican, or were you already Republican entering law school?
Yeah. So thank you, Juan, for answering his question, because whenever we say that we're not a monolithic people, specifically when it comes to politics, it's like, yeah, everybody but the Republican side. And I am someone who had a very interesting upbringing. I lived in an orphanage. I've been adopted, born with drugs and alcohol in my system, supposed to be aborted and wasn't. So I have a very unique upbringing that allows me, I believe, to traverse people and conversations in a completely different way. in my role and what I did at the Indiana Republican Party, I was the director of diversity, the only director of diversity for the Republican Party in the entire country for 5 years. After I got that title, diversity training was banned federally by Donald Trump. So that just sets the tone in one of the most reddest states that Mike Pence came from. And so it just kind of provides you with a little bit of background, helping to get LGBTQIA plus people elected as Republicans in Indiana, helping to get more Black people elected as Republicans in Indiana. And I think it's very valuable that we have our voices at all tables, meaning I don't want to sit at the Kamala table, but you can sit over there and you can advocate for the Black community at that table. And I can sit at the Republican table. And then we got the other doctor, and she can sit at all the tables because she's independent. That leans left. So she may not want to sit at my table. But what I'm saying is it's important to have our voices heard by everyone. And it's important that we, as Black people, understand that it's you first, right? So before they know that I'm Republican, they see me as a Black woman. So at the end of the day, my treatment is going to be just like hers. And it's going to be less than his because he's a Black man in America. And so understanding that is very important. And whether or not we agree, disagree, dislike, the decorum that we should have is that we are protecting community at the end of the day. When it comes to Trump and what I like about his policies in particular, I'm someone that's pro-life, that's based upon my own experiences in life.
You were meant to be aborted.
Exactly.
What does that mean?
That means that they were going to pay my mother to have an abortion because there was so much drugs and alcohol in my system that I wasn't growing. And instead, she checked into rehab while she was pregnant with me. Instead of having the abortion and going to the appointment. My mother still suffers from addiction today. My mother still suffers from mental health issues today as we speak, same as my biological father. I am a product of the 90s crack era, even though I was born in 89. And so what I like about his policies, I like the fiscal and the economic benefits of the policies. I like that he signed the First Step Act, even with the coercion of Van Jones and maybe Kim Kardashian. I like that policy because I saw people from my community being let out of jail, from my state being let out of jail. I was a California resident for quite some time. I worked on campaigns in California for Black Republicans in California. And so I have lived under Kamala Harris's senatorial. I've lived under her being my attorney general, and I've lived under her being the district attorney. So I'm very familiar with the way in which she governs and the way in which she leads and the way in which she treats her staff and people that work for her and the way in which that she
have you found that and this isn't whataboutism, but I'm genuinely just curious, have you found that Trump has been known to treat his staff well or to treat people with dignity, kindness, care, respect?
If Trump does not like you or you do something that upsets him, he will just let you go. He's gonna just let you go. You're just gonna get fired. Like he's gonna fire you. With Kamala, and you can ask some people that are media personalities that have spoken about, I worked for her, but I had to leave. Simone Sanders.
No, I've heard that, but I've also heard a lot of Trump was abusive, Trump was racist, Trump used racial epithets, I heard Trump use the N-word. These are quotes people are saying. Kwame Jackson, we'll talk about it. There are lots of people. Anyway, it's fine. It's just an interesting contrast. One would think
this is what I'm saying. So usually if Trump doesn't like you, he just fires you. He fires you, he's going to talk bad about you. In the other cases from people that I've known that have worked with her and experienced her, it's a consistent berating of you while you're still there and walking on eggshells and being afraid to voice your opinion, being afraid to do your job, that basically deteriorates your mental health to where you just are forced to quit, if that makes sense. So
Gotcha. Do you think Donald Trump's racist?
Do I think Donald Trump? I think most politicians in DC are racist. No, I don't think that Donald Trump is explicitly racist, but I do think that he has perpetuated racist statements against people that look like me, specifically Black men, when it came to the Central Park Five.
Do you think Donald Trump thinks that Black people are inferior?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you think Donald Trump, do you believe that, when I look at Donald Trump's history of, saying, Judge Curiel.
Now, I just want to make sure, are you going to ask these same questions about Kamala to?
Yeah, remember at the beginning of this thing, I said, David, I'm going to ask you, what I said is, Well, no, what I said is I said, David, I know these answers from you
I'm
'cause you're
old
talking
and I'm
about it
getting
before, but I'm
sleepy.
still going to ask you these questions as well. I said that before I went to you. I think the difference is you're offering a position that's somewhat counterintuitive to people. For example, if you came on here wearing a bunny costume, right? I might say, hey, why'd you show up to the interview wearing a bunny costume? That doesn't mean that I have to ask David and Feminista why they didn't wear a bunny costume to an interview, because
But if
it's
you're
somewhat
peppering,
counterintuitive.
like it's the problem is I get asked a question, I answer it, and then it's like this and this and this and this.
Like follow-ups.
It's like so many of them. And then I'm like
Then
trying
I
to
won't ask
read.
anymore. Then I won't ask anymore.
But I'm just saying, like, and this happens so much to Black Republicans specifically because people are just so intrigued. Like, yes, they want to study my. They're just so intrigued. They're just like, oh, so you're a director of diversity? Oh, you're helping to like, but how does that work? Well, if you would let me speak, I can actually talk about it. I can tell you about the racism that I've experienced, but I can also tell you about the great things. The guy that in the comments. That was, do y'all think Biden is racist? We
absolutely. He absolutely is.
Absolutely.
The guy that there was a thing that popped up here that said that I lost my job under Trump. No, I didn't lose my job under Trump. I stayed in the role. It was federally mandated that there were no diversity trainings, but that didn't have any impact on me because I didn't work at a federal level. I worked at a state level to answer that question. But all in all, I think conservative policies win. I think that they are good specifically for minority communities. And I want to see us at least just hearing out conservative policies. Now, not all Republicans are conservative, and you guys need to understand that. Not all Republicans are conservatives. And I would even venture to say in Trump's first term, when it came to spending specifically around like COVID, he was not very conservative. However, we were in unprecedented times.
I disagree, but that's another. We can talk about that another time.
With the deficit and printing money
To stimulate spending when the economy is going to bring a collapse, and giving $1 billion to Wall Street while giving a much smaller amount to Main Street, with the stipulation under the premise rather that they're going to spend and reinvest in American capitalism, to me is a very conservative and even neoliberal conservative position. But again, that's another conversation for another time. I know we got to go. Y'all sleepy. I ain't got nothing else to do because I don't do anything else. But I appreciate.
Do we get final statements?
If y'all want to do final statements, we can, but they got to be 30 seconds. They got to be a real 30 seconds.
Yeah. So I just want to say this is I acknowledge what you do. I spent a lot of my life, my work as a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor, working with people who have had addiction and things like that. And it's unfortunate that so many people like you went through that because Nixon flooded our communities with drugs, and they admitted to that, and that was intentional, and that was Republican policy. And when you ask, Joe Biden is racist, absolutely. We have to go back to 1994, right? So I believe that to be the head of the United States, you have to kind of believe in white supremacy because that's what the United States is about. What I want to say is this. I think the debate today, I think that Walz did better than Harris did against Trump, and I think Vance did better against Walz than Trump did. And while I acknowledge that that Vance is a pathological liar, I think he's a fantastic debater, and he's really great and behind that mic, and he can convince people who don't know better. I think where Walz connects with people is he's the everyday person, and I think a lot of the folks on the left, even if they're like very close to the center, they're kind of just looking for the guy down the street. They really are. And I think that with him being there, it helps the Dems. And my final statement is that Kamala Harris should be way, 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 way ahead of Trump by now, and she's not. And that should concern anybody that is trying to vote for her. They have to figure out, why can't she pull ahead and go from there? 700,000 people, their votes are right there to win. That can change the election. What is she going to do? All right, I do have to go though, because I am about to go to sleep. I'm 45 years old.
Thank you.
I love you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. These things always end up going later than we thought. I'm going to give Whitley the next word. You're muted, my sister.
Unmute yourself.
You're like a Black Republican at the convention. Go ahead.
No, I just said I've already had my last word. You can give it to Dr. David.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Dr. Jones.
I appreciate knowing that she's good. I pray that in the spirit of her talking about protecting community, that she is in community with Black people who love Black people. What I'm vexed by is knowing that my Black, queer, freedom-loving, democracy-defending self cannot contemplate safety or existing under a MAGA Trump administration. And J.D. Vance said that he would have certified an insurrection. That should disqualify him from running for office based on Federalist interpretations of the founding documents for the country that they profess to care for. Donald Trump inspired and instigated an insurrection. He should not have the ability to run for a third try to destroy democracy. Mark, I'm thankful for you for the bond that compels me to ask questions, including why I show up in spaces to engage in conversations that have a visceral reaction in my being. Again, because while for so many people this is just theater, for me this is about my being. I don't understand. I'm struggling with sharing community with Black people who profess loyalty to a party who does not want them to have control over their body. What I said earlier about productivity was not clickbait. It's a genuine question, and I still don't feel like I have the language to engage in the kind of conversations that would allow me to understand how my sister occupies the space she occupies. My hope is that that check is big, that that bag is nice, and worrying about my freedom, my ability to marry the man that I love, who loves me, to have access to the history that has birthed and affirms me, that is being questioned by white supremacists and white racial actors like you, vexes me. So I want to be clear. I'm not angry. I'm enraged by the fact that we are here in 2024 having this version of this conversation when there is so much on the line.
We got to have that conversation another time, more, because I think that that's an important question. I think one of the challenges I have is that there are people, particularly in my audience, who have the same critique of Democrats, who say that there are Democrats who don't care about, and I don't mean you at all, but there are Democrats who are incredibly indifferent to what's happening in Palestine, who are incredibly indifferent to what's happening in Sudan, who don't give a damn about the fact that Kamala Harris is willing to sign more bombs. And I literally get, even if you look at the comments tonight, there are people over here who say to me, why do you have pro-Kamala people here as my people are dying? Why are you willing to be in community with these people? And I'm not saying that it's the exact same distinction.
It's not.
Because it's not. But to the Palestinian who is enraged at Kamala Harris's even today endorsement of Israel.
Are they going to vote for Donald Trump? That's my sincere question. Are they going to be satiated by Donald Trump being in office? That's a sincere question.
And I think for some of the people, the answer is yes. For some people, for most people, I think the answer is no. Just hear me out. For some people, the answer is yes. For most people, the answer is no. I think for the bulk of the people I talk to who have this position, they won't be satiated by either person being president. But what they feel is a kind of, and it's this thing we talked about last time. If you knew somebody would be the best president in the world for every issue, but you also knew that they didn't respect your humanity, it might be a moral non-starter for you. And I think there are people who see the genocide in Gaza as a moral non-starter, despite the fact that Kamala is infinitely better than Trump. And or vice versa, if you happen to take that position, which my audience doesn't. But I'm just saying, ultimately, I think there are people who are just feel ethically and morally compromised by the options they're given, and they're outraged, and they don't want to be in community with anybody who even stands near Kamala. And I don't take that position, obviously. You know, I think we have to be pragmatic, and I think we have to be thoughtful, and I think we have to be tactical. I don't believe, certainly at this age, that voting is a reflection of our individual values at the one-to-one level. You get what I'm saying? I think I don't have to believe in Kamala to believe or Jill Stein or whomever to believe that they're the best option. For me, what option will give us the best outcome to get us closer to freedom? Right? That to me is the question we have to ask and the question we have to answer. And when I bring people in community, it's not for the theater of it, because there are people far more extremists than Whitley who I could bring in. There are people who are far more unreasonable about Kamala, or are far more uncritical of Democrats than you or whomever, right? There are people who will just sit there and do this the whole time for clicks. That's not what I want. What I want is a real dialogue so that we can get, and I wish I did hear more from Whitley about the why of it, the why of why she makes this choice, because I want to understand it better, and I want to understand more from you, David. And again, not tonight, we're going to wrap now, but I want to understand more about the kind of, you make a very pragmatic decision, a very sober decision about when you decide to vote Democrat at the top of a ticket, right? You're making the best choice you can make for freedom. I get it, right? That comes with compromises. That comes with that's a process. And again, we don't always arrive at the same place. There are moments where you and I have disagreed on this. I'm a Green Party member, and there are times where I say I can't just hold my nose and vote Hillary. I just can't hold my nose and vote Obama. Not because I want to win some. It's not the virtue signal, but because I don't want these to be our choices every 4 years. And so I have to ask myself, how big is the threat, and how big is the possibility down the road for having something better? And honestly, I'm so profoundly frustrated at the last 4 years and the last 8 years under Trump and Biden that I often don't know what to do, because I don't want to make a choice that makes me look righteous but compromises your freedom. I also don't want to make a choice that kills another 40,000 Palestinians. And so I struggle with it, honestly, and I don't have answers. And part of maybe selfishly why I bring so many of you all in the community with each other is because I don't have those answers, and because I'm looking for answers and clarity. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Anyway, I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Whitley, promise me you're gonna come back. David, I know you'll come back because you're my brother. And somebody just sent 99.99 on the cap. Whitley, are you a member of a Greek letter organization?
I am not, but I did graduate from the Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
I heard of that place. That's a real good
Heard
place.
of that place.
They produce some.
It may have birthed one of the greatest fraternities.
Whitney, can we have a conversation in real life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Y'all connect offline. I think that's gonna be great. Y'all might form one of the greatest friendships ever. You know what I mean?
Let's get his expectations. I just simply wanna have a conversation in real life.
Yes.
I appreciate this exchange.
I love y'all. I love y'all so much. Everybody, thank you for watching Night School. It's been a pleasure to do these debate coverages, we're gonna do these every chance we get. I love y'all. I love talking to y'all. I love dialoguing with y'all. And I'm grateful to my guests for staying up. I'm grateful to Princess for staying up as well. She doesn't like spending this much time with me, and it's already way past the time we said we'd be. So I'm grateful to her and the rest of my staff for being so generous with their time and their sacrifices. I am every single night. Everybody, make sure you hit those like buttons. Make sure you hit those subscribe buttons. When you hit the like button, it lets those YouTube algorithms know that we are in the game and we are not just fighting amongst ourselves. We're fighting corporate media for space because we need that, y'all. We love y'all and we need that. Also, I want to ask you to hit the join button. If you're on the desktop, hit join. If you're on your phone, hit the link in the description to get to join. Become a monthly subscriber, just like Whitley did. We converted her to. She down with the squad now, man. She gonna learn a secret handshake and everything. And then if you don't want to make a monthly commitment, please go to those platforms you see right on the screen there. We got Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, and Zelle. I am in a fight with Cash App that should end tomorrow because they tried to make us pay some fees that we shouldn't pay because we are not selling y'all nothing. We getting donations. But in every other way, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, 2, 3, and 4, feel free to send something. It could be $1. We're grateful. It could be $1 million, like Princess donated last week. We're grateful. And it could be anything in between $1 and $1 million, and we're grateful. But if everybody watching right now, if every single person watching right now were to donate $10, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, $10, we will meet our financial goals for the month. We'd be able to pay our staff, pay our bills, invest in the new studio, get some outside help for editing. we'd be able to do all the work that we do, and to do it even better than we already have, and to keep the content going. Night school, Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Office hours, 9 p.m. on Sunday. We got a good one coming up this weekend too, fam. Saturday, 9 a.m. for coffee and books. And of course, Sunday a.m. with Mumia Abu-Jamal, our beloved brother who is a political prisoner. Those episodes will be starting up. I'm going to send some new ones over to Princess ASAP surely. I'm grateful for y'all. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Keep watching, keep supporting, keep sharing, but most of all, keep studying, because that's what night school is all about. Peace.